Well, good afternoon and welcome. Great pleasure to introduce Darren Walker to you today. And he's written a number of books entitled the Heaven and Hell series, where Satan invites God to meet just to cause trouble, which I really approve of that. Sounds good. It's good fun. Perhaps we can start with a very brief reading from one of your books.
Yes, certainly. The reading is from the first part of my first book, Closing Shop, and it's where, as Sue says, Satan is bored with hell, and he decides that he wants to be allowed back into heaven, and he's trying to set up a peace conference with God. This is how it starts. Satan wasn't on his best form today. He was fed up. He'd been... I've got contact lenses in, so it's hard to see in my own book. He'd been pensive for the past couple of decades and knew he was completely depressed. Being evil just wasn't fun anymore, and he'd got bored with the whole thing. Yes, he truly believed in his heart that hate was what he should thrive on. It should fill his very soul like a forest fire. After all, that was what made people do evil things, and those evil things brought their souls to him instead of going off to the other, far duller place. But what was the point? Hate was a blanket that could be spread over everything. He could hate a fluffy golden retriever puppy. But big deal. Besides, he secretly found them cute. But he would never tell his loyal demons that. They would make his existence hell instead of the other way around. In the big scheme of things, he should hate everything. But how could he loathe a house brick or a glass of lemonade? Sure, he could easily make the brick crumble to dust or make the drink go off, but so what? Given the right amount of time, nature could do that for him. Anyway, so it was a complete waste of his evil talents. Maintaining enthusiasm for hatred was draining him, and he couldn't be bothered with any of it. Pardon? This is the one. Well, it's not banned in America. It's just that will come later in the questions. But yes, it's the one that is not popular with a certain religious group. Yes.
I mean, I haven't been banned yet, so I'm feeling very left out in the whole process.
You need to up your game.
I'll try my best. So, as you say, the devil is bored and he's looking for a bit of fun. But where did the idea come from? Because that's quite novel, really.
Well, I started off writing articles for an American arts website. It was a very long-winded route that I started writing for them. But eventually the website closed because it wasn't making any money, which wasn't my fault, honestly. But I was left with the writing muse going, keep writing. And I didn't want to just write a blog, so I thought, right, I'll write a comedy. But I thought, I want to write something where, a bit like Terry Pratchett or Douglas Adams, where you create your own world and you can just write the next book and you've already set up the foundations. I thought, well, what really works for me? And I thought, well, demons are always, you can always take the mickey out of demons, and you've got angels and mythology, and you can sort of put them all in the same stories, and you can play fast and loose with the stories. So I've sort of St. Michael, I've turned him into an officious military leader rather than the sort of great leader in the Bible and things like that. And you can create demons usually with lots of extra X and Z's in the names and weird spellings. And I thought that'd be fun. So I thought I started creating the heaven and hell loosely set around the sort of Dante's Inferno and the different layers of hell. But I just played fast and loose with these ideas, and heaven would be how I would imagine it if I ever get there, unlikely as it may be. So it's I just used those as the base, and I thought, well, what would be fun? And I thought, well, what would happen if Satan wanted to be allowed back into heaven? And obviously he'd never get allowed back in there, and it'd make my series of books very short if he did. So I thought, right, let's have them have a peace conference. And where would be good if there was to be a sort of second apocalypse, but it'd be very limited. So I thought, well, why not Hawaii?
And why Hawaii is the question?
Well, at the time I had some friends who lived there. In fact, I've still got a friend who lives there. And even though I've never visited, I did a lot of research on the island, and there's a hotel on the sort of north bit of the main island of Oahu. I can never pronounce it anyway. And I just changed the name and slightly changed the building, but I left the golf courses in and things like that, and I based that for where the conference was. And when the two armies come down to Earth and to Hawaii, they end up encamped next to each other in this nature reserve. But I did my research on the nature reserve, and the guy who actually lived in Hawaii didn't even know the nature reserve existed because he'd never been to it. So I found out more details than he did. And so I just thought, well, Hawaii sounds a wonderful place, and if I ever became successful and the Hawaii Tourist Bureau ever wanted to invite me, it's still the opportunity, Hawaii, if you're watching. And so I thought, well, set it there.
I obviously need to up my game because my first book, which I published, is set in exotic places like Scarborough, which I love, and Whitby, but not Hawaii, not yet anyway.
Oh, it's easier for you to visit Whitby
It is
and
much
sell your books
easier,
there, yes.
Yes, much easier to visit Whitby, undoubtedly. So, thinking about your story, whose side are you? Are you with the angels or the demons?
I try and actually don't take sides, because obviously you think, oh, evil is bad and things like that. But if to try and write Satan as all bad all the time, you just have the same level of intensity and anger and rage and hatred, and it just doesn't work in a story where you're trying to have comedy. You've got to have nuances in there, and he has bad moments and he has good moments, and he can be secretly cheerful as long as he doesn't let it onto his minions and that kind of thing. And God himself, I've tried to make him not this sort of person up in heaven who's always angry at people or do as I say kind of thing, but more of a kind of good human being. He has his own faults. He tells double entendre jokes with some of his senior angels. He can have a good laugh. He occasionally breaks wind, and it's so there's elements in there that makes him more relatable. Obviously, he doesn't have evil things, and he does everything for the good intentions and for the best. But I try and make him more relatable than this sort of bearded
Man on a
cloud with a white beard and the white gown. Even though in a couple of chapters he does appear like that, but in other chapters he turns a bit more like Colonel Sanders and stuff like that.
So is one of the fun of writing the book is actually making up your demons?
Oh yes, I mean, when I write a book, I will have roughly chapter headings, so it's like the skeleton.
Yeah.
But I will start writing them, and I just let my imagination go wild and see where my mind takes me when I'm writing it, because I sort of think, right, okay, I want to get to that point, and I'll sort of, right, okay, start typing away, and then it gets there. But sometimes I'll end up writing 3 chapters that aren't planned before I get to the next checkpoint, as it were. And so I just have fun and let my imagination go wild.
And do your characters run away with themselves? So you think you're going to be A, B, C, and they suddenly shoot off to Z when you don't expect it? Or are you fairly disciplined in your writing?
Actually, I do let them evolve, because one of the characters in my book is called Roxy, and she's loosely based on a friend of mine. In real life, she's an Italian who lives in Germany, and she's an angel in my books, not in real life. She's a nice lady. And I've sort of based a lot of her backstory on her real life, and I started off with, I had her doing things that I thought that the real friend would do.
Yes.
But as she keeps recurring in different novels, future novels, and she's become stronger and different, and she just does things because she's become her own character, separate of the original template.
So she's really become her own person,
oh,
hasn't
yes,
she,
yes.
in effect?
Yeah, so you read some of the later novels and I think, oh, she sounds absolutely nothing like the original, my friend, one. But it's sort of they just evolve and grow.
So I have to ask the question, which of your friends are the demons based on?
A lot of the demons are actually based on ex-husbands of good friends.
Oh, right.
So
I wondered what you were going to say.
No, it's just, no, there's one demon who's actually the ex-husband of Roxy, and he ends up rematerialising back in hell with his head and shoulders sort of stuck in rocks, and it becomes a tradition that any demon that's on the way to the sort of portal to go to Earth has to give his backside a whack with the cricket bat before he goes. So that's his punishment for all eternity. And so the ex-husband is the butt of jokes in my novels.
Does your friend know this?
Oh yes, he loves it.
Oh dear. So who is your favourite character out of all your demons and angels?
It's hard to say because they all develop and become their own characters and have their own sense of humour and laugh. But I think my favourite one has to be Darren, because in a sense he was based on me.
Right.
To start off with, I mean, you read the description of him and he's about my height, a bit podgy, losing his hair, but it's just me just letting my wishful thinking go wild with the character. He's successful with the ladies, he's got this dark, smutty sense of humour, so obviously he's nothing like me in those two factors, and I just have fun with him. But I try and make all the major characters, I want to have fun with them, so I like them all.
I did the same. I mean, when I started, I wrote 5 elderly ladies, and they were based on real people. But you're right, isn't it? It's that great fun, you think. And my characters are nothing like the real people, honest. But I do notice bits of me sneaking into the book and thinking, that's how I think. I'm not saying which character. Yeah. Especially the bad-tempered, grumpy, arguing with everybody. That could be me. No, surely
no.
not. But it is good fun, though, isn't it? It's quite sort of therapeutic, really. You can say all sorts of things.
Oh yeah, if someone really annoys you, just create the character with them and just make them suffer. But the problem thing is though, I used to work at a company and they had one of these sort of charity auctions online, and it was basically people would bake a cake to the highest bidder, or you could spend a day brown nosing with the CEO or things like that. And I thought, right, highest bidder gets to be a character in one of my novels. And I was sort of monitoring the auction. I'd seen 2 people really desperately fighting to become a character. I thought, oh, fine. So eventually the lady that won it was a friend of mine, so I contacted. So, okay, well, what type of character do you want to be? You can be a human, you can be an angel, or you can be a demon. And straight away, I want to be a demon. I thought, right, okay, fine. I suppose demons, like in the films, the horror films, the demons and the evil people tend to be the most interesting ones. So I thought, fine, well, okay. And because she's a Cockney, she said, oh, can I have it so that my hair turns into eels? I thought, that's so Cockney, isn't it? Just on eels. And I said, okay, and I don't know which was more worrying, the fact that she wanted that or the fact that I could create a character where that happened, and it was just really strange.
But it's really weird, isn't it? Because one of my characters is mad, loves men love her, wonderful. And the number of people who said, oh, I'd love to be like her. Mostly ladies who've been married forever, their state husbands. But yeah, it is great fun, and I think that's lovely, auctioning a character.
Oh yeah, I mean it was charity, so why not?
Yeah, and demons always have the best bits, don't they?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I could, with the character, I tried to make it funny so they'd really appreciate it. But if they'd have gone for an angel, it'd have been funny as well, and human as well. So I'd have put comedy into it, but it's just. It's what they chose, and I thought, right, it's just I even had them going into battle so their head turned to eels.
A touch of Medusa, really, heads and snakes.
Yeah, it's like a Cockney Medusa, that's it, exactly, yeah.
Are you planning to write any more books in the series?
Well,
Or perhaps publish might be more
published
accurate.
would be more like it, because I've got 7 more books written and waiting to be published. So it's just my next book is called Dead Gods, which is book 3, but I've got as I say, so many more written, and I've sort of tried to, a bit like Terry Pratchett when he does his Discworld novels, have different characters coming to the fore and leading the storylines, so that one central character doesn't become the character.
Yeah.
It sort of moves on and someone else comes to the fore and they lead the story and things like that. So, but I've got to a natural conclusion where Deedon retires to Earth to try and live a normal life, because his backstory is he sort of fell in love with an ancient mythological god when he was alive,
Yeah.
in ancient biblical times, and he never really found love ever since. And then he sort of falls in love, and I don't do love stories, but he sort of falls in love and he decides to settle on Earth. But that's where I've left it. But there's opportunities to write more stories after that, and I've written a standalone comedy set in a fictional South American country, so it's a bit like a modern day version of an Ealing comedy.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I've also written 2 medieval fantasy novels full of dragons and ogres, and I'm sort of trying to write the 3rd in that series at the moment. So I keep writing. I've got lots of plans.
So
as
do
well.
you do a lot of research? Because, I mean, obviously, you've got to have a knowledge, haven't you, of the sort of basics of religion, even if you just take them in completely different ways.
Oh yes, I mean I do a lot of research. I mean even weaponry. If the police were to look at my search history, they'd be very
dear.
why does he want to know about GB-14 nerve gas or assault rifles? Why is this subject so interesting? It's from my novels, honest. So I do a lot of research on it, and I read lots of religious texts. I read lots of books on mythology and things like that. And sometimes I'll come across interesting, obscure characters in mythology. I think, and recently I've sort of came across Helenus, who was Cassandra's brother. So Cassandra in mythology was cursed so that she could always had the gift of prophecy and could always tell the truth, but the curse was nobody would believe her. So she sort of predicted the Trojan horse, but nobody believed her. But her brother Helenus was the opposite. He was one of the stories is he was cursed, where he could only ever tell lies, but everybody always believed him. So he went into politics, and so I thought, well, that's going to be one of the characters in one of my next novels, because I thought it's just such a great thing that you can say whatever you want and it can be complete rubbish, and everyone always automatically believes you, no matter how far-fetched it is.
Yeah. I'd never heard of Helenus. I have heard of Cassandra, but...
Well, she gets all the glory because of the Trojan story, but I think the problem is with a lot of Greek myths is there's so many variations of the characters, where in one story he did this, another story he went off and he went to join the
army
the Greek army,
yeah.
and things like that. So
Yeah.
but sometimes you fall upon a variation of the story and you think, oh, I love that, and I've got to adapt it into a novel.
Fantastic, that's really good. So, thank you. But talking about religion, you got into a bit of trouble, didn't you, with an American church?
Oh yes, it was alluded to. Yes, it's
yes,
basically as a joke. A friend of mine in America, she just sent them a copy of my book, Closing Shop, and it's Westboro Baptist Church. So if you've ever watched any of the Louis Theroux series, he visited this American small church called Westboro Baptist Church, and they are so bigoted that they'll go sort of picket funerals of American soldiers, or they'll picket the Super Bowl, and they'll have these banners saying God hates this, God hates that, and I think after a while I think God isn't that full of hate and things like that. But they're just basically, I became the victim of their hatred and bigotry, and I thought, in a sense I was actually pleased, because I'd have been more upset if they'd have liked me than if they'd have hated me. So it was just so funny, because you go on their website, look it up, because sometimes they'll just have a go at somebody and then they'll take it off and they'll start attacking somebody else. And I just looked at it one time and they're having to go at Billy Joel for his Satan music, I'm thinking, yeah,
Billy Joel?
yeah, sorry,
Yes.
Billy Joel, the middle of the road Slayers
Yes.
cover band. But and in fact, they're more famous for kicking out their founder and former leader because he wasn't bigoted enough. So,
It's quite weird. I went to see the Book of Mormon in Manchester before COVID, and if anybody's ever seen it or haven't seen it, it's very, very rude, but it's incredibly funny, and it really does take, well, in some ways it doesn't take so much Mickey out of the Mormon church, but the local Mormons, instead of picketing saying you mustn't see this terrible play or musical, it was, come and see us, come and find out the real story. And what a fabulous PR scoop. It was in all the Manchester Evening News and everything. This little Mormon church was saying, well, actually, come and talk to us. And I thought, gosh, what a way of spinning something, a bit like you're saying, how the church could have reacted. And no doubt, most people take it as comedy as is, but some get very...
well, there's nothing in the book that was aimed against them. It's just the fact that God is mentioned and Satan is mentioned, and so obviously they hate anybody who isn't part of their church anyway. So it's
very difficult.
But I think with the Book of Mormon, I've just got visions of it being a bit like Father Ted with them outside with banners hanging down with this sort of thing.
Oh no, it's brilliant. If you haven't seen it, I say it's
I've seen
very
it, yes.
rude.
Oh yes.
But it's fantastic, and not as perhaps as anti the Mormon Church as you might expect. In some ways, it ended up being quite respectful. But anyway, we digress as ever. I also understand that you've been banned from Facebook once or twice.
I seem to get these temporary bans on a weekly basis. I got one this morning that I had to contest because I posted a meme yesterday taking Mickey out of people who wear Manchester United shirts. So it's just silly things like that. And if you've ever seen my Facebook page, I post far worse than that on a regular basis. But it's just random things that someone objects to or Facebook algorithm picks up, and they'll just sort of send me saying, "Oh, we're going to ban you for this," and then as soon as you sort of protest and say, "Oh, I disagree," they'll look into it and actually say, "Oh, well, actually, okay, carry on." But it's just ridiculous Facebook. But it's just, I enjoy being on it, but it's just, in fact, part of the fun is seeing when I'm going to get the next ban for nothing.
Oh, being rude about Manchester United, that's
Mandatory.
Depends where you sit. I have a husband who's a very keen Manchester United supporter.
Somebody's got to.
Absolutely.
But he doesn't live in London, so he shouldn't be a Man United fan.
No, he's lived in Manchester, so how wicked is that?
He should be a City fan then, shouldn't he?
They've got better kit. But anyway, enough of football. So what attracted you to writing comedy rather than more serious stuff?
Years ago, when I was a teenager, so it was a long time ago, I started to write a thriller, and I wrote the first couple of chapters, and I just couldn't get any further, and then I'd shelve it, and then a few months later I'd come back and try again, and do another chapter, and then I'd shelve it, and I'd come back to it, and I'd just delete it and start it all over again. And when you're young, you lack the self-confidence, and you think, oh, nobody's going to want to read it, so you rip it up and you start again. And then I shelved it, and then a few years later I come back to it, and it just the same story, and you shelve it again. And then when the website finished, I thought, shall I try getting on with this thriller? And I couldn't do it. And then Roxy, my friend in Germany, she said, well, some of the articles you wrote for the American Arts website were really funny. Why don't you write a comedy? And it was just like a light bulb moment. It seems so obvious. If you know me and my character, it's just sort of, comedy is my obvious default for everything. It's a way of dealing with the world, and it just seems so obvious. And bing, and so that's why I decided on comedy.
And it's surprising there. I mean, there's the greats like the P.G. Woodhouses, but there's relatively few comedy writers. You know, you look at crime, you look at romance, sci-fi, masses and masses and masses, but actual comic novels, what I call proper books, there aren't that many.
Well, a lot of people say that it's hard to write comedy, but to me it comes naturally to me, but obviously people write to their strengths, so it's probably easier to write a serious thriller because you don't have to have sort of comedic characters that sort of come in,
They're the best ones.
drop things on the floor and make a fool of themselves. Whereas in a serious thriller, you've just got someone comes in, someone gets murdered, they find the killer and off they go, kind of thing. But but I just enjoy it, and I do plan to write some serious novels in the future, and I've got the plots ready and things like that. But there's still going to be elements of very dark humour in them.
Yeah. And would you say your humour's very dark, or that your heaven and hell novels? Or?
Not as such. There are elements of dark humour in there, but there's lots of slapstick comedy in there as well, where there's sort of people trying to go through the doors and the egos won't let the other person think, so they get stuck in doorways, and sort of there's characters called the demon cows, which are the least efficient and least scary demons in hell, and they come to Earth and they get stuck in a field with a bull, and there's obvious issues there with what the bull does, and there's other elements when people get transferred to Earth from hell. They lose control of the body functions and things like that. So there's lots of humour, that kind of humour. But I was brought up on the Carry On film, sense of humour, and the sort of James Bond double entendre kind of smut and humour. So there's lots of that in my novels. I don't go for a lot of the highbrow comedy.
Yeah. So what makes you laugh? Outside of writing your books, what makes you laugh?
I see comedy in unexpected places, and the world is an absurd place. It's ridiculous, and there's so much darkness, so much sadness, so much hate, anger. But if you go out there and you look, and you'll sort of see, I mean, I post a lot of joke memes where there's sort of silly signs, but I go out and I just sort of notice something and just looks really weird. And it's like, the other day I went to Leicester and they had this sculpture that celebrated sport in Leicester. So it had a character with a cricket bat, another person with a rugby ball, and another player with a football, but it was just all in the same sculpture. And they had this sort of, the cricketer had his foot on the head of the rugby player, and I was just thinking, I'm thinking, I'd love to see that as one single sport, which is sort of a cross between cricket, football, rugby, and rollerball.
Oh, great fun. Anything else you want to tell us about your books?
Well, if you enjoy comedy and if you enjoy fantasy, they're available to buy here, and I'm happy to sign any that you want to have. But just one thing I'd say, that if any of you ever want to write, then don't worry about having an audience. Just do it because you enjoy doing it, and if you've managed to get a publisher, whether it's by the conventional route or self-publish, just go for it. Just enjoy it, and that's the main thing. Because if you don't enjoy doing something, don't do it, and go find another hobby.
And I think it's fair to say one of the joys of writing comedy, and I know I certainly did, over many glasses of wine as well, I have to confess, is actually your friends give you stories and ideas, don't they? And it becomes a very jolly process, isn't there?
Oh yeah, sometimes the sort of people will tell me things that have happened to them, and I sort of think, well, that'll fit nicely into the story, or things that have happened to me. I mean, in my second novel, there's 3 demons that sort of materialise in a park in Florence, and they get lost, and they try and ask this old Italian lady who's walking the dog the directions to get to the main centre of Florence, and she just sort of talks to them in this sort of machine gun Italian with the hands gesturing, and they have to ask her several times, and eventually sort of they give up, and she just does directions like that, and that it basically happened to me. I just got wandering around Florence, and I got lost in this park, and I was talking to this old lady, so I basically adapted my own experiences and put in the novel.
Yeah. Occasionally you get an experience that you can't put in, which is a great pity. They're always the best, but you think, perhaps not. But
no, that's never stopped me so far.
Oh, right, okay. But it's good fun.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, well, thank you. Has anybody got any questions for Darren?
Yes, hello there.
You obviously have Ava on the show, or sometimes you self-publish.
Well,
Do you have a good relationship with your publisher?
My first 2 books were through a conventional publisher, but it was a small company. I mean, a lovely lady that runs it, very helpful, very friendly, but unfortunately there was no real budget for marketing, and with the contract she took the lion's share of the royalties and I got a pittance. So my next book I'm going to try doing as self-publishing, and that's why it's taken so long, because I'm just hesitant, because it's my first attempt and I don't want to get it wrong. So I'm just taking my time, and I'll be self-publishing my next book, which is called Dead Gods, and fingers crossed it'll be out in the next month. Well, it's one of those things where you just want to get it right, because I did try, excuse me, I did try self-publishing it a couple of months ago, but I used the wrong self-publishing company, and they tried to put it on Amazon at about £20 for a paperback and about £8 for Kindle. I thought, I want to sell books, so it's ridiculous. Excuse me. Yeah.
I think Edwin does most of ours these days, and he's very patient. Does all the technical bits, don't he?
Yeah. So,
So much easier.
yes.
You know, and my son had a 99 and on Amazon, it was lovely, and then I decided to put them on paperback. The last 2 I put on paperback, and I don't find it difficult.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things. If you've done it once and you know what you're doing, it'll be easy.
Well, my son used to do it, and then he says it wasn't, so I just dropped me. So I had to learn. Yeah, he'd done 10 other books, and he just dropped me, so I had to learn. There's such a huge mass. You know, you've got trained authors and trained down at Kent, you know, so honestly,
Oh, yes.
and they look nice, you know.
I have to say, I am not good at technicals. I'm absolutely hopeless. As Edwin has found to his cost over the years, but he's very kind, and I send things and say, will you please do? And it works very well. So, is there any more questions? Yeah.
Regarding the self-publishing side, what plans and strategies have you got for editing and marketing? Have you thought those through yet?
Well, the editing, I've got a friend in America who does it for me, and she's amazing. She's such a pedant, even though the Americans speak a gibberish type of English, and they can't spell it, and they get the words wrong and things like that. But the actual context and the word, getting the sentences right, and she's very thorough, and she does a fantastic job. So I've got no problems with editing. It's just a case of marketing. I've got in the literary festival loop, and that's very hard to get into, because usually it's a catch-22. You have to be really famous to get into the literary festivals, or you've had to have done literary festivals previously. So I've managed to get into literary festivals, so I can get into those. So they're good for sales and doing events like this, and just going lots of different things online, and just get yourself out there. And
What do you do about reviews? Do you seek out reviewers?
I do seek them out, but getting them is a nightmare. I mean, the number of people promise to do reviews and actually do put them online, it's a very small percentage. And they say you need to get about 25 to get onto the next tier of Amazon views and things like that. But trying to get them online to actually review them, it's difficult. And it's just simple. Just go on, put 5 stars. Obviously, I want 5 stars for me, but put 5 stars and 2 words, good book. It's not taking out a massive chunk of your time to put in a comment, but they just promise it and then they never do it, and that's always a hard part. And then you'll get people who go in and they'll just say terrible things about a book, and it's obvious that they've never read it. I mean, I've got friends who've had their books advertised on Amazon, but it hadn't actually been released, and they've got reviews panning the book, even though they can't have read the book. They're just people just so petty. And I have a couple of friends who've written autobiographies, and the comments have been basically, oh, it's all about themselves and it's self-centered. I'm thinking, it's an autobiography, what do you expect?
I think reviews are always difficult, aren't they? Because I'm very fortunate. I've had lots of very positive reviews because friends and family are wonderful, I think. But sometimes you read, as you say, you read book reviews and you think, one, has a person actually read it? And I haven't had any nasty ones, but I know people that have.
One star with a woman, she only read half of the first chapter. And she called it, this is the author's alter ego, blah, blah, blah. But to be honest, I never read the reviews. I stopped years ago reading reviews. It gets a nice 5-star, and then suddenly your eyes will go on a 2-star, and you'll be so depressed the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But I find that if you've got 5 stars to 1 star, it's credible. You don't want all 5 stars because that's Auntie Gladys and Grandma and that. But if you've got a whole range, I think you're credible then.
Well, I've got mainly 5 stars, to be honest, but it's not Uncle Albert and Auntie Gladys kind of thing. It is people around the world who've actually read my books and things like that. So the lowest I've got is 4 stars, but you're still thinking, why didn't you give me 5 then? And it's, but I mean, it's as you say, I've known people and they'll get 15 5 stars, but they'll focus on the 1-star review and it'll bring them down. Thinking, forget the 1 star, just read the 5 stars and take heed from that.
I have to say I don't these days.
Because I think the reviews really for readers rather than the author. And I never tout the reviews. I just let them do it if they want or not.
Well, I've started writing a blog for the Books and Beverages website. What I've read every month. One book is always my book club book, and I like reading various books that have sort of historical type books, so there's always one of those in, and I always try to do a modern one, because what I've found is that my taste is aiming to sort of ancient crime novels and things like that, which is very old-fashioned. And I read the reviews before I get them. The library is wonderful for all these, and they all come with glorious 5 stars here, there and everywhere, and they've been reviewed by The Guardian and the Sunday Times and all the rest of it. And so often I find them so disappointing because they're not to my taste, obviously, but I do review them and try not to be too unkind about what I think, because even if it's a terribly written book, and most books are not terribly written by the time they've gone through the editing process, but there's no need to be unkind about it. If it's not to your taste, just say it's not to your taste.
I review every book I read, every single book I read.
That's impressive.
I tend to not review if I don't like the book, because as an author, I don't want to give another author bad reviews and low stars. It's just cruel. So just, if you like it, say it, but if you don't like it, just move on.
My minimum is 3 stars, but if I don't particularly like something, I'll do a sandwich. My husband taught me something nice about it, and then put the only thing, the quibble I've got is you've got this wrong with England.
Yes.
And then, but highly recommended, and I did enjoy it, and I read to the end. So you make a sandwich.
Yes. Can I just ask a final question? No more questions.
Edwin's been waving at you for ages.
Well, he's sitting behind me. Well, good grief. Sorry, Mr. Ryberg. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, Darren, so you mentioned you're working on publishing the 3rd book. I was just wondering how many books you have written in the series altogether.
I've got 9 in the Hell and Heaven series, so obviously I've got 7 more waiting to be published. I've got the standalone South American comedy and two fantasy ones. So I've got 12 books written in total, plus I'm on my 13th one at the moment.
You have some work to do in your publishing then.
Oh, yes, I've got the next book proofed and ready, and I've got the first 2 in the medieval fantasies proofed and ready, so they're going to be the next ones to be coming out, but I'm just trying to get the covers organised for them, and because okay, it could be more than a trilogy, but at this moment in time it's a trilogy, so I'm trying to find a book artist who can capture my ideas for the book covers so that they can share the same imagery and themes.
My final question, and I have to ask it because I'm sure you've all been very polite. I love the red suit and the red hat, but why?
Well,
It's Darren, well,
well,
yes,
firstly, if you're going to be an author, you need to stand out. To me,
This is true.
It's a bit showmanship and it's a bit pretentious if you want to look at it like that. But if you're going to go out, people will say, "Oh, you remember that Darren? Oh, the guy in the red suit? Oh, yeah, I remember him." And also in the books, Satan often wears a red suit. So I thought, well, let's get into the dark side of the character.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Anyway, that's it from us. We'll be here back on, is it the 5th of May?
Yeah, that sounds right.
5th of May, so thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for everybody for coming, and I appreciate the traffic and the trains and everything like that being horrendous today, and the weather's not great, but it's wonderful to see you, and thank you.
Thank you.